Hi, my name's Ava Nguyen, and I'm a member of the Environmental Action Movement Club. You probably haven't seen or heard me before because, unfortunately, my class falls during our club meeting schedule. But today I'll be talking about the bad side of COVID-19, or more generally speaking, the environment during COVID-19. Um, so, first off, it's something to feel optimistic about our environment because many of us have been under lockdown and haven't gone out very much. This is generally reflected in our lower air pollution levels to a certain extent. It really depends on the type of pollutant you're talking about. So NO2 versus PM2.5, for example. But beyond that, you probably have also heard anecdotes about people seeing clearer water or seeing more wildlife. Um, I'm sure you heard that viral story of the person who saw swans in Italy. But while that is a cool story, it's not a good reflection of our current situation. And part of the reason for that is because of Trump, the president, who has been cutting back environmental protections and regulations during this pandemic. He's been doing that even before, but he's been taking advantage of the pandemic to roll back even more uh, standards. Of course, this ties back to the bigger problem, which is that many people don't take climate change seriously. Um, it's tempting to think right now that this pandemic will last forever because it's taken so long. Um, and I'm sure that there will be many long term effects on certain industries and areas of life. Unfortunately, I don't think the environment will be one of them. So, I want next to talk about the current state of the world, which is a big topic to cover, and unfortunately, I won't get to every story. I'm not omniscient, so, uh, but here are a few of the big ones. And the first is something you can see for yourself, and that's worsening climate disasters all over the world. Um, we can see it here in our home state of California, where wildfires are lasting longer, getting bigger, and are more destructive. Um, this is reflected all around the world, not just with wildfires, but with storms like hurricanes and floods and droughts. Um, it's pushed many people off their homes and will continue to in the future as climate change renders many places unlivable. Um, this is something that I hope to talk about more at a different later date. Um, but our next story is our struggle to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. Um, this is also a complicated issue um, because of big corporations who stand to benefit from um, fossil fuels and who continue to pollute, and people whose livelihoods depend on these fossil fuels. It's something that I want to talk about later as well. I'm sure you've heard the current story about ExxonMobil. Uh, they're a big oil conglomerate, and a leaked report found out that they were going to pollute more than they said they would, which honestly doesn't surprise me very much. But um, we'll talk more about oil companies and their role in climate change and global warming later. Um, the problem here is that greenhouse gases are already locked into our atmosphere. So, what we're seeing now, um, rising temperatures, worsening natural disasters, is something that was already set into motion by actions of the previous generation. Um, that means, unfortunately, that we will continue to see these troubling trends. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything about it. Um, we can, and we definitely have to, because even if we don't see the fruits of our labor in our lifetime, future generations, so our children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, will definitely be affected by this. And we can do that for them. This upcoming US presidential election is highly important. Um, and also, I mean Senate, which doesn't apply to California this year, and House, local elections as well. Um, they're all extremely important. Uh, the US is unfortunately a huge contributor to pollution all around the world. Um, we are the biggest contributor per capita. Uh, and without means to sound arrogant, the US holds a lot of sway on the world stage. Um, so this election is very important for the fate of our planet, and we all play a part in this. Um, I'll talk more about that later. Moving on, so what about our current state of California, since we talked about the world? I just want to briefly mention that California has, for a long, long time, has been at the forefront of the environmental movement. Um, and it's our job to continue this long legacy. Um, One thing I want to talk about is the Advanced Clean Trucks Rule, which is um, which requires California to push for zero emission trucks. It was passed this year, and the reason why I want to talk about it is because it's the world's first. It's really important, and also um, you probably will be hearing about this from a speaker we'll have on later, since we're kind of associated with the Sierra Club, and they played a huge role in campaigning for this. You'll hear more about that later. Um, Other things of note are Governor Gavin Newsom's new legislation on cars and his 30 by 30 promise, which is, or I shouldn't say promise, but it's a commitment to protect 30% of California's, land and natural resources by 2030. That's a very, very brief summary of it. You can follow Environment California for updates. Um, they focus on environmental issues in California. But, and I talked about this earlier, record wildfires is probably the main story this year when it comes to California and environment. Um, many conservatives will pin the blame on forest management as a problem, but it goes deeper into that. Um, of course, it has to do with climate change and also electrical management, which is, a problem. Uh, it's a little difficult for me to explain because, um, well, it requires a lot of background knowledge. But you can read this really good article by the Sunday magazine, and I'm not sure you know about it. It's like a California only magazine. It usually comes with your newspaper. It doesn't come every week, but actually, I'll link the article when I post this to YouTube. It's really good. It's very long, but it's so well written. Um, the writer is a fabulous journalist, award winning, and you should definitely read it. Uh, Anyways, so what we can do about this? I know that this sounds very pessimistic, and I haven't gone through every single thing that has happened during this pandemic and during the last few years of this Trump presidency and our whole entire lives. It's really hard to cover. A lot of things have changed. But even though everything seems doom and gloom, don't don't be pessimistic about it. Like don't be complacent and don't lose hope. There are things we can do to help our environment. Um, I think the most important thing is educating yourself and others around you about climate change and why it's so important. Um, when I talked about earlier, the main issue being that people don't think of climate change as a big deal. Many don't quite understand the science behind it, which isn't even that difficult. And, you know, I was looking recently at voter issues, and many people, they don't put climate change as a priority. Um, Many people will put things like the economy or healthcare and immigration and income inequality over it. But it's important to know that all these things are linked to the environment. Those things are very important, of course. Um, but you have to understand that it's impossible for something to be disconnected from the environment we live in. Um, Other things we can do that I think Gisela mentioned last time was to minimize our carbon footprint by driving less and eating less meat and pushing our politicians for more options when it comes to renewable energy, for example. Um, there are so many things we can do. And I didn't mean to make this whole presentation sound really down. I know. Uh, I study the environment and climate change for my major, and yeah, it's sometimes tough because I feel like there's no, you know, there's no point in studying this if we are all doomed. But it's important not to give up. Things that we can do, besides all this I mentioned, is get involved in our community too. We can start our community gardens or garden for ourselves, and we can participate in research projects. I did a presentation earlier this year about the decline of butterflies and insects and how we can help by observing, um, you know, the world around us and uploading our data into sets for researchers to pore over. Um, Eventually, I hope to introduce this to our club, so stay tuned. Um, but really, you should vote, vote, vote. Um, it's very easy to lose hope right now and to think that politicians do nothing for us. But besides educating yourself and doing all these things, people really underestimate the power of a vote. So I hope you will all vote this election if you're able to, which you probably should be. Um, if you need help, you can contact us for help. But there are a lot of guides on how to vote. Um, make voting make climate change a priority when you vote, because, like I said before, many people don't think of it as a big issue. People will eventually, but by then it might be really too late. Um, yeah, but not to scare you, please do vote. Lastly, some final words. Oh my gosh, I left the last bullet point empty. Okay, if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask. You can ask me, Professor Romo, or Gisela for help. And we have lists of resources to help you learn more. So we have organizations you can contact or get involved in, and documentaries for you to watch, and articles for you to pore over, everything. Um, like I said before, continue learning about the environment around you and try to keep up with the news. Um, like I said, I know the news can be really gloomy to listen to, but it's important to keep up to date on things that are important to you. Try to make the environment a daily commitment in your life, or a commitment in your daily life, I should say. Maybe that's wrong grammar. Um, and take care of yourself, because it is easy to get depressed over the state environment. Um, it's very easy to feel dejected. Um, but know that there is something we can do, and that you are not alone in this. Um, as always, you can contact us for help if you're feeling down over the state of our environment. Um, and thanks for listening in. See you next time, hopefully.